Are you seriously eating again? My brother's voice cut through the music like a razor, loud enough to make a dozen heads turn. I froze, halfway through lifting a bite of lemon cake to my mouth. He stood at the center of the dance floor, one arm around his new fiancée, the other holding a half-empty glass of champagne. His smile was sharp, but his eyes were pure venom. Before we begin, drop a comment and tell us where are you from and from which city you're watching our videos? And after watching the whole video, don't forget to tell us what would you do in this situation? Be honest, tell me in the comments below. We read every comment. Let's begin. The room went still. Conversations paused. Glasses clinked against nervous fingers. She only came for the free food, he announced, laughing loud and ugly. I mean, come on. What else would a waitress be doing at a Sutton family wedding? My fingers tightened around the dessert plate. I heard someone snort behind me. Another chuckled. And then someone whispered, "Isn't she the one who got dumped last year in a Waffle House parking lot?" Heat climbed up my neck, but I didn't look away. I stood. My dress wasn't designer. It wasn't even expensive. Just a soft, old navy blue slip with a belt I tied to hide the wrinkles. The heels were borrowed. My hair? Pulled back in a clip I found in my glove box this morning.
But my spine?
Unbreakable. Watch your tone, I said, meeting my brother's gaze dead on. He walked up, slow, taunting, until there were barely inches between us.
What?
Afraid the truth's too loud in a room like this. He leaned closer. Face it, Amelia. You're just not one of us. Then he tossed the water. Not spilled.
Tossed.
It hit my chest with a slap, soaking my dress, my arms, my pride. A collective gasp rippled through the ballroom. My plate dropped and shattered. Laughter.
Soft. Ugly.
Insidious. I didn't blink. I didn't flinch. I just reached up, calmly wiped the water from my cheek, and said, voice sharp as a blade, "You'll wish I hadn't come." And right then, the front doors flew open.
Heavy. Loud. Dramatic.
Every head turned. And there he was. Black suit.
No tie.
Cufflinks that could buy this entire venue. His jaw was clenched. His gaze locked on me. My husband. Whispers flew like wildfire. Wait, who is that? Why is he coming here? Oh my God, he's walking toward her? Carter's face drained of color. I didn't move. I just tilted my head slightly as my husband stepped beside me, looked down at my soaked dress, and said coldly, "Did he do this to you?" The room stopped breathing. And then my billionaire husband took off his jacket and put it around my shoulders, shielding me from their stares, before turning to Carter and saying one sentence. "You have 60 seconds to apologize, or I buy this venue, cancel the wedding, and throw every one of you out." And just like that, the Suttons froze. Because they finally realized I wasn't just anything. I was the woman they shouldn't have mocked. Not tonight. Not ever. No one moved. The chandelier above us hummed, like it was holding its breath. Carter's mouth opened, then closed. Brielle clutched his arm, her expression wobbling between confusion and fear. I didn't mean anything by it," Carter stammered, his voice suddenly boyish and brittle. "It was just a joke." My husband, Mason, didn't blink. He slid his gaze over the crowd like he was scanning a battlefield. "I don't do jokes when it comes to my wife." And that sentence? It shattered something. You could feel it. In the quiet scuffling of chairs. The retreat of smiles. The realization bleeding into every face. They had picked the wrong target. Brielle broke first. "Amelia, I think there's been a misunderstanding," she said, voice coated in false sweetness. "We had no idea you were worthy," I asked. "Valuable? Human?" She blinked. I turned to Mason, feeling the heat of his jacket against my skin. "Let it go," I said softly. "They're not worth the trouble." "No," he replied coolly, stepping closer to Carter. "You are." "Look, man," Carter said, palms up. "Let's not turn this into something bigger than it is. This is a wedding. Let's just move on." "I agree," Mason said. "Let's move on." And then he reached into his inner pocket and pulled out a folded document. My stomach flipped. Mason. He handed it to Carter, his eyes like iron. Carter opened it. His eyebrows lifted, then dropped, then furrowed into sheer disbelief. What is this? I bought out your company last week, Mason said. It's mine now. The room gasped. I stared at him. You said you were going to wait. I was. But then he threw water on you. He looked at Carter again. So, I made a call. Carter's hands trembled. This can't be legal. It is. Signed off and finalized yesterday. Your COO already knows. You'll receive your severance by morning. There was no noise now. Just stunned, brutal silence. But why would you? Why would you do this? Carter asked, his voice cracking. Just because of her? Mason's jaw tightened. I did it, he said, because of what I see when I look at her.
Grace.
Strength. Loyalty. All the things you people wouldn't recognize if it hit you in the face with a gold-plated invitation. He turned to me, gently brushing a wet strand of hair from my cheek. You came here to honor them, and they humiliated you. That's not something I'll ever let stand.
I didn't know what to say.
Not because I was speechless, but because this right here was the first time in my entire life that someone had chosen me without shame. And he did it loudly. Security, Mason said, nodding toward the hotel staff. Escort Mr. Sutton out. He's no longer a guest of this event. You can't do this. Carter shouted. This is my family's wedding. Mason stepped forward, voice sharp as ice. And you made it a public disgrace. Your mistake. Carter tried to protest, but the guards were already approaching. People turned away. Others watched, wide-eyed. And still others, the worst of them, sipped their champagne like this was reality TV. Carter's voice echoed as he was led out. His fiancée followed in a daze, her face pale, her future evaporating. I watched them go. And I didn't smile. I didn't need to. Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't the one leaving in shame. You didn't have to do that, I said quietly, once the doors closed behind Carter and Brielle. Mason tilted his head. Do what? Buy his company. Humiliate him like that. He arched a brow. He drenched my wife in front of a crowd of 200 people and called her worthless. I'm not here to play nice. My heart thudded in my chest, not from fear, but from the weight of being seen. Protected. And yet, there was a flicker of something else crawling beneath my skin. Guilt?
No.
Not guilt. Sadness. Because I had spent years trying to prove myself to that family. And all it took was one evening for every illusion to shatter. Across the ballroom, guests tried to pretend nothing had happened. The band resumed a softer tune. Waiters served hors d'oeuvres as if they hadn't just witnessed a public takedown. But I could feel their eyes still on me. Whispers. She married rich? Was this a trap? Maybe she came here to get revenge. I glanced toward the exit, my pulse screaming. I need air, I muttered, handing Mason his jacket. Want me to come? No, I whispered. I need 5 minutes to remember who I am before I forget it again in there. He didn't argue. He just nodded once and let me go. The garden behind the venue was empty. A soft wind rustled the hedges and made the camellit lanterns flicker. I stood near a marble bench, staring at my reflection in the fountain. My dress was still damp. My hair clung to the side of my face. I looked like a mess. But beneath all of that, I looked free. I sat down, ran a hand through my hair, and whispered to no one. Why did it take all this for them to notice me? Suddenly, I heard heels clicking across the stone. I turned. It was Aunt Clara. Always elegant. Always opinionated. She stopped a few feet away, hands folded, her expression unreadable. Well, she said. That was a scene. I said nothing. She stepped closer. I always thought there was more to you than they saw. But I also thought you'd grow out of the need to prove yourself. Is that what you think this is? I asked. Some grand performance? She sat beside me, slowly, like she wasn't sure if she belonged there. I think it's survival. And maybe a little bit of revenge. I met her eyes. Is that wrong? She didn't answer right away. No, she finally said. Not if it makes you finally breathe again. I exhaled. We sat in silence for a moment until she added, he loves you, you know. That man in there. Mason. I've never seen anyone look at someone the way he looked at you. I swallowed hard. I'm afraid I don't know how to receive that kind of love. She looked at me, softening. You're learning. And they're learning what it costs to overlook someone with fire in their bones. I stood up. I should go back in. She nodded. Let them see the fire. Back inside, the mood had shifted. The family had regrouped like nothing happened, but the tension was still thick. And it only worsened when I returned. I walked in, head high, hair still damp, dress wrinkled. And still, the room moved for me. My cousin Michelle stepped into my path. You know, she said with a forced smile, I always wondered how a waitress like you could land someone like Mason. I raised a brow. You mean someone who treats me with basic human respect? She flinched. I guess that's foreign to you, I added, brushing past her. I could feel Mason watching from across the room, his eyes quietly asking, You okay? I gave a small nod, then turned toward the microphone at the front of the stage. It wasn't planned, but something inside me cracked open. I stepped up, tapped the mic once, and said clearly, before the toasts continue, I just want to say one thing. The ballroom froze again. I scanned the crowd. Every single face. From the cousins who gossiped about me, to the uncle who once called me the family embarrassment. You called me a waitress, I said. And that's exactly what I was. I worked 14-hour shifts. I scrubbed grease off floors. I poured coffee for people who didn't tip. And I never once felt ashamed of it. Whispers. But what's sad, I continued, is that the people who were supposed to know me best were the ones who looked down on me the hardest. You all mistook struggle for failure, work for weakness, kindness for stupidity. No one moved. I leaned in. And now, the girl you called just a waitress is the one who now owns the future your golden boy lost.
Gasps.
I smiled gently. Enjoy the rest of the night. And I walked off the stage. Not a single person dared speak. I didn't stop walking until I found Mason again. He was waiting in the hallway near the lounge, hands tucked in his pockets, face unreadable. As I approached, his expression softened. Just slightly. You okay? He asked. I nodded slowly. I said what I needed to say. His jaw tensed. I wanted to say something too, but I didn't want to take that moment from you. You didn't, I replied. You let me own it. He tilted his head, studying me. You look taller. I think I am. We stood there for a few seconds. No words. Just breathing in the aftermath of everything that had unraveled inside that ballroom. And then, do you want to leave? He asked. I paused. Yes, I wanted to walk away from those people forever. But there was something in me that needed to stay a little longer. Not for vengeance, but for closure. No, I whispered. I want them to see me stay. Back at the reception, the air had turned fragile. Laughter had dulled. Conversations were careful now. Every word weighed against reputation. And when Mason and I walked back in together, side by side, the room shifted again. This time, they moved for us. We sat at our assigned table. The seat cards had still read Miss Amelia Sutton. They didn't even know my last name had changed. Didn't know I'd stopped being one of them the day I stopped asking for their approval. I turned the card upside down. Excuse me, a voice said beside me. It was my mother, hair tight in a bun, a dress that cost more than my apartment's annual rent. She hadn't said a single word to me since I arrived. Until now. I had no idea, she began, her smile brittle, that you'd married. That I married? I echoed. Or that I married up? She flinched. You've always been so emotional. And you've always been so absent. She blinked rapidly. I didn't mean to hurt you. You just didn't care if you did. Silence stretched like a blade between us. Mason didn't interrupt. He knew this was my moment. I always thought you were ashamed of me, I said. Turns out, I was just the part of you tried to hide. She pressed her lips together. You always wanted to prove something. No, I said. I wanted to matter. That did it. Her mask cracked. The tightness in her face gave way to something too raw to hide. I didn't know how to be a mother to you, she admitted, voice low. You weren't like the others. You mean I didn't perform for the family image? She swallowed. You had your father's fire. And your silence, I said. But I've given both back. She looked away then, and when she finally walked off, she wasn't angry. She was empty. And somehow that was harder to watch. As the night dragged on, the family's hierarchy shifted. People I hadn't heard from in years came over, trying to slide into conversations with me and Mason. One cousin asked about investments. Another suddenly remembered how close we used to be as kids. And when the DJ tried to get the crowd back on their feet with an upbeat song, Mason leaned close to me and asked, "One dance?" I blinked at him. Here. Especially here. He pulled me to the dance floor and held me like I mattered. Like I was never something to hide. The chandelier light caught in his eyes, and for the first time that evening, the noise blurred. Just me. Just him. Just us. I leaned into his chest, let the music drown the memories, and felt the weight of every insult, every dismissal, every look of disgust, finally lift. I don't need them to love me, I whispered. Mason smiled against my temple.
No.
But it's beautiful watching them regret not trying. Later that night, just before we left, I passed the dessert table again. Same spot I stood when Carter humiliated me.
But now?
No one laughed. And as I reached for another slice of lemon cake, one of my second cousins actually moved aside, wide-eyed, like I might be dangerous just by breathing. I took my bite, let the sugar sit on my tongue, then turned and walked out of that wedding, like I just buried the girl they never bothered to know. The next morning I woke up to chaos. Not in my home, but on my phone. Missed calls. Dozens. Text messages. Screenshots. Headlines. I scrolled, slowly, stunned. Carter Sutton ousted from family business in shocking overnight deal. Anonymous billionaire acquires majority stake. Bride cancels wedding. Sources confirm Amelia Sutton married to Mason Quinn, CEO of Quinn Holdings. Photos were everywhere of the moment Mason put his jacket around me, of Carter being escorted out, of me standing behind the microphone mid-speech. I hadn't planned any of this. And yet, somewhere deep down, it felt necessary. Not revenge. Not victory. But balance. A gentle, brutal restoration of everything that had been stripped from me, piece by piece, for most of my life. That afternoon, my father showed up. Uninvited. Unannounced. Mason wasn't home. I opened the door myself. He stood awkwardly on the porch, wearing a sports jacket that looked slept in and eyes that looked older than I remembered. "Amelia," he muttered. "Can we talk?" I didn't invite him in. I stepped out onto the porch and folded my arms. He glanced around. "Nice place." "I like it. Bigger than you need," he added. I looked at him flatly. "That's funny, because your love was always smaller than I deserved." He winced. "You were always hard to talk to."
No.
I was just done waiting to be spoken to like I mattered. He shoved his hands in his pockets. "I didn't come here to argue." "Then why are you here?" He hesitated. "Because you're still my daughter." I took a breath.
No.
I was your daughter. Then your disappointment. Then your absence.
And now?
I'm someone you're trying to realign with before the media finds out you haven't called me in 3 years. He looked ashamed. "I made mistakes." "No," I said softly. "You made a choice." Repeatedly. He stared down at the porch boards. "You said nothing while Carter humiliated me," I added. "You clinked a glass. Smiled with the rest of them." Silence. I stepped closer, not angry but honest. "If you're here to rebuild something real, I'm open to it. But if you're here because I've become someone you can be proud of in front of other people, turn around." He looked up, watery-eyed. Then he nodded, quietly, and said, "I'll call again. Only if you want me to." He left. And for the first time in my life, I didn't beg anyone to stay. A week later, I walked back into the diner I used to work at. Not to be recognized. Not to flaunt anything. Just to remember. Darla, my old boss, spotted me from across the room. Her mouth dropped open. No way. I grinned. Hey, boss. You look like you just stepped off a yacht. I laughed. More like out of therapy. She came around the counter and hugged me tight. I heard. I saw the pictures. I cried. I still miss the coffee here, I said. Even if it was always burnt. She laughed through tears. You are too good for this place. No, I replied. I was made here. She smiled. So what now? I took a breath. I'm opening a community kitchen. In our old neighborhood. Pay what you can. Free meals on weekends. I figured if the world only sees value when you win big, then I'll teach them to see value in people who haven't won yet. She looked at me for a long second, then said, You're still the best waitress I ever had. The night of the opening, Mason showed up in jeans and a flannel. No suit, no headlines, no cameras. Just him. He helped pour soup, wiped down tables, sat with an elderly woman for 20 minutes because she said he looked like someone she once loved. And when we finally locked the place up, exhausted, elbows smeared in flour, he kissed my forehead and said, You weren't made for them. I leaned into his chest. No, I whispered. I was made to spite them. He smiled. And now, he asked. I pulled him close. Now, I said, we build something that no one can tear down.